Why did games feel cooler in the 2000s? Let's get into it.
Multiplayer and midnight releases, you might think the golden age of gaming is behind us. But when exactly was it? To get some answers, I had to go back in time myself. Back to an era without endless remakes and remasters. An era where, in many ways, video games reached their absolute pinnacle. But what I found there was kind of unexpected. Not only do I now think that gaming peaked almost 2 decades ago, I actually think you can narrow it down to a single year.
I think gaming peaked when the PlayStation 2 Slim came out and everybody was able to get a console. And then the 360 came along and the 360 just changed online gaming for forever.
Reason for this? Well, there's 3.
Oh yeah.
Now, Xbox doesn't have a perfect track record, especially in recent years. In the 2000s though, they were moving differently. The advertising was aggressive and stylized. Their first console,
everything green, bro. I remember the Red Ring of Death used to be a thing in this era. Yeah, man. 360, goated console. If you didn't have a 360, you messed out on life. Oh, but this is just the Xbox. Hold on.
had a bold design with translucent special editions. Microsoft was hungry to prove themselves, but the original Xbox had a major flaw. Put simply, it was sitting on shelves with the PlayStation 2. Or rather, it wasn't, because for every one that sold, Sony moved 6 PlayStations. Despite its exclusives and revolutionary hardware, the Xbox ultimately cost Microsoft around $4 billion. It was a cultural hit, but they were still firmly behind PlayStation. If Microsoft really wanted to compete, they needed something formidable, something that actually posed a threat. So, with 2.5 years to spare and all of the money in the world, this is what they came up with. The year is 2005, and the 360 releases for $299 US. In return, you get one of the most powerful consoles of the decade, and your ticket into the world of HD gaming.
Literally, a 360 would have lasted you 10 years if you got it on release. The 360 was so advanced that it was able to last 10 years. Let me just put that in perspective. 10 years. I can't even imagine not playing a 360 now. If I was a kid, I couldn't imagine having a PlayStation 3. I never had one. All I had was a 360. This was crazy.
Before this, you were largely limited to 480p and bulky CRT TVs. Suddenly, you could play Call of Duty in a crisp 720p. Of course, to really appreciate the jump, you have to know someone who knows someone with a $4,000 flat screen, but it's still exciting, and things only get better when you turn it on. Much like the original, the 360 has a sleek, futuristic interface with reflective surfaces and glossy green gradients. At launch, there's no shortage of titles to stick in your disk drive either. Call of Duty 2, Need for Speed Most Wanted, which costs like $200 now for some reason, and my personal favorite, PGR 3. I spent ages playing this as a kid. Was it as good as Most Wanted? No, but being able to jump from Tokyo to Las Vegas and London was crazy, especially with how detailed the maps were. Just look at these environments. This is over 20 years old, but when you compare it to Forza Horizon 6, the gap doesn't feel nearly as big as it should. And
it was peak graphics. Everyone optimized their game. Every game looked good on a CRT. See, on a CRT TV, you see how it looks all pixelated right here? On a CRT TV, it would smooth these edges out and it wouldn't look like this. It wouldn't look the same.
Honestly, one of these looks a lot cooler than the other. I found that with a lot of games on this console. The 360 era had this distinct aesthetic and energy that modern titles simply don't have. Games felt cooler because they looked cooler. First-person shooters lent into these gritty, stylized visuals, and racing games had this edgy underground feel to them. Today, you can pretty clearly notice the difference. So why is that? Well, let's have a closer look at Need for Speed Most Wanted. The original release from 2005 looks completely different to any modern racing game. The first thing you'll pick up on is the lighting. Every source emits this hazy, ethereal glow. Oncoming traffic, street signs, it's almost overwhelming and impossible to ignore once you see it. This is called bloom, and it was everywhere in the mid-2000s and early 2010s. Developers used it to make games feel more cinematic, while working within the hardware constraints of the time. It allowed them to soften the lighting and disguise less detailed environments by blending imperfections together. It's one of a few reasons reasons these games seem to hold up so well today. Without it, all of the low-res models and textures would be fully exposed. Naturally, it wasn't just a technical choice. Having this dramatic, over-the-top lighting added intensity to otherwise normal scenes, pushing the atmosphere of certain games closer to that of a 2000s action movie. Bloom had its downsides though, and it led to many titles having this washed-out aesthetic, and areas that were emitting ridiculous amounts of light. Go back through Gears of War and Halo 3 ODST. There is no reason for this.
Alright, unpopular opinion maybe, but that bloom, the almost the mistaken bloom added to the game. Like, no one ever complained about the bloom to me in Halo or in Gears of War. It kind of was just the game, you know? It made it feel authentic. It wasn't perfect, but we loved it for what it was.
Hill to be brighter than the sun. Overall though, I think Bloom added to the feel of many games. The vibrant, glowing lights of Most Wanted and PGR3 feel a lot more exciting than those in, say, Forza Horizon 6. In some instances, they almost look closer to the real thing. Still, there was something about these games that stood out a whole lot more. I just didn't realize the scale of it until I loaded up GTA 4. The game is just brown. Like, even in the middle of the day, there's this yellowy tint over everything. If you're subscribed, you probably already know what this is, but for those of you that are new around here, welcome to the channel. This is called the piss filter. From 2005 to 2013, you'd be hard-pressed to find a AAA game without it. Need for Speed Most Wanted, Gears of War, Resident Evil 5, Deus Ex 3. What's even stranger is that it kind of works. Sometimes. For one, it makes GTA 4's take on New York feel so much dirtier and more grounded. We're seeing the world through the eyes of Nico Bellic, an ex-soldier who is deeply traumatized and stuck in a cycle of violence and depression. It makes sense that there's this yellowy brown haze over everything because it matches the bleak tone of his story. People have actually made mods that remove the filter altogether. While it does look a lot cleaner, you definitely feel the mood shift in its absence, going from dark and stylized to more neutral in tone. Anyway,
I wouldn't want to take away the piss filter, to be honest. I think the piss filter adds that warmth to the screen, something like, so it's not so bland and bleak. The buildings aren't just white, you know. It adds some feel to the game, like it's always in a sunrise or sunset kind of mood.
As I got deeper into GTA 4, and frankly all of these games, I started to notice something else. Not only did they hold up surprisingly well visually, but I kept finding details and gameplay features that we haven't seen since. Like, stuff that was impressive back then was somehow still impressing me 20 years later. We'll come back to that when we get to the next console, because the games weren't the only thing that made the 360 special. What Microsoft did with this slab of parts and plastic started the single most chaotic period in gaming history.
Oh! Oh my god! No! Get the camera! Quickscope is cheating to start with. Reported.
From the late 2000s to the early 2010s, the most intense experience you could have in a game was waiting for one to start. Some of the most heinous and evil sentences ever conceived came straight from Call of Duty lobbies. This era
Goated lobbies, by the way. Let me tell you, I've never, you know what I'm saying? I'm not going to say why they're so goated. We all know why they're goated. But I was in an MW2 clan. I was sniping. We were playing Search and Destroy. We were taking that real serious. And then Call of Duty Ghosts came out.
For all of its shortcomings, was arguably the peak of online multiplayer, and behind it was Xbox Live. Originally launching in November of 2002, the service took off with games like Halo 2. And when the 360 dropped 3 years later, every console was shipped with it in mind. You got a headset with a mic, an intuitive friends list, a unified profile with achievements that followed you across every game. This is all very standard now, but at the time it was huge. Microsoft.
Alright, hold on, go back. I would always pick either the dragon or the pirate or the dog. The dragon, pirate, or dog. Those are always my guys. And then I got some like random one that looked goofy, and then I put that one on. But it was either the dragon, the dog, or the pirate. Because at the time, my name was Dragon something. Dragon Warrior. Something like that. I don't know what was up with me thinking dragons were cool. That just was my name though.
Every game. This is all very standard now, but at the time it was huge. Microsoft made online and party-based gameplay accessible to millions of players. For the first few years, the only real limitation was the amount of games available. And then 2007 happened. There's a lot to cover here, but for now, I'm only going to talk about 2 releases. Halo 3 and Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. When Halo 3 released, it was a cultural event. The midnight launch saw thousands of people queuing up in anticipation, and it sold over 3 million units in its first week. It was so successful, in fact, that people started blaming it for the sudden drop in movie ticket sales. So, looking back 20 years later, was this really something worth lining up for?
The best Halo ever made was Halo 3. So yes, it was something worth lining up for. That game looked phenomenal. It still looks phenomenal. And even with all the limitations back in the day, that game was phenomenal. Halo 2, great story, great campaign. Halo 3 just did everything better, made it look better. Combat was elite. This is peak Halo, guys. This is peak Halo.
Yes,
I'm on
with
my knees.
Forge, theater mode, split screen, and an incredible campaign at launch, there was so much to do right out of the box. Like the 360, the game was designed to be a social experience from day one. Forge and file share let you test and create maps for other players, and through theater mode you could replay matches from anyone's perspective. Before long, an entire community developed around these features, with machinima, custom maps, and an explosion of content on YouTube. Halo 3 was so popular that it more or less became the reason to own an Xbox 360. For me at least, it was the first Halo title I ever played, and pretty much my only motivation to stick with Xbox for the last few generations. Yes, I have the Legend achievement, no it's not a big deal. Either way, Halo wasn't the only heavy hitter for Xbox Live, and in 2007, its rival put out an absolute banger.
50,000 people used to live here. Now it's a ghost town.
Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare changed everything. For years, military shooters had been stuck in the past, mostly taking place during World War II. Modern Warfare, though, was set in the near future, meaning the combat and storyline was completely different. Take the mission All Gillied Up, for example. It was slower and stealthier than the traditional run-and-gun approach of the genre. The campaign as a whole was a massive hit, establishing long-running characters like Captain Price and Soap. I mean, they're still around to this day. Despite all of this, it was the multiplayer that really stood out here. It had this really satisfying progression system. The way you unlocked guns, attachments, and perks was smooth and rewarding. It was also the first title to feature the prestige system, meaning there was even more of a reason.
I got to Prestige 4. Once I got to Prestige 4, I was like, all right, I'm over it. I'm not grinding a game that much. I mean, we only had a year to grind just about. So I'm not hitting 10 Prestige in a year. You had to dump like 1,000 hours in the game in Prestige as soon as you get to level 60. I like to enjoy some of the stuff that I get. But I went to like Prestige 3 or 4 usually.
The first title to feature the prestige system, meaning there was even more of a reason to stick around and put in hours online. And putting in hours online was exactly what people did with these two games. Together, their release marked the beginning of a generational run of online gaming. Modern Warfare 2, Black Ops 2, Halo Reach. I don't think it'll ever be replicated because the way people play multiplayer has fundamentally changed. This era was driven by social features that were baked into both the 360 and the culture around it. Gamer tags, custom games, pre-game lobbies, split screen. You could tell a lot about someone from their profile picture alone. Today, these more casual experiences have slowly started to disappear. Games like COD are inundated with constant meta updates, guides on the best attachments, and a general anxiety about efficiency and competitiveness. Whatever it was that made this era so memorable, I think it started and ended with the Xbox 360.
I think what made it so memorable was being in the party chat till 2 a.m. Chatting with the boys, not even caring if you got school tomorrow. Or let's say we're on the weekend, we don't got school tomorrow. We're on all night with the boys. We're running lobbies in Reach. We're running lobbies in Call of Duty. Oh, we get bored? What? We're going to go right to zombies on Modern Warfare. I mean, this was elite times, guys. If you didn't live through this, I feel bad, man. You missed out on a lot. And to be honest, if I would do anything to bring this back. I mean, nowadays I can't even play the game for 2 hours without getting sick of it, you know? Maybe it's just because I'm getting older.
Hey guys, Extra Mint the editor here. Not gonna waste your time with a whole ass ad read, but if you like free stuff and a lot of it, Microsoft discontinued it in 2016, it marked the end of something special. So many of the features that made it legendary were simply left behind with the Xbox One. There was less of a focus on gaming for some reason.
Right. So stick with 360, that's your message if you don't like it?
If you have zero access to the internet.
The charm of the 360's avatars, UI, and player-first customization was all but phased out. For me, this felt like the last time Xbox knew what they were, and actually had a strong identity and vision for the future. The numbers speak for themselves, and none of their other consoles have come anywhere close. But by itself, the 360 doesn't prove that gaming peaked. It only gives us one piece of the puzzle. You see, following its success, the pressure was on Sony to reclaim their territory. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to enter the most intense console war the industry had ever seen. At one point, it would be so close that only a few thousand units separated them. That brings us to 2006, when Sony finally gave its answer to the 360. People love to compare this thing to the Xbox, but they were two very different consoles. On paper, the PlayStation was more powerful, having an insane array of story-driven exclusives. Even playing through them now, I'm shocked at how good they still look. The truth is though, PlayStation had set themselves apart before any of this hit shelves. I'm sure you've seen this video at least once. Known as the PS3 baby commercial, it was arguably Sony's strangest advertisement, which is saying a lot considering their history. The video itself is relatively simple, starting with a doll sitting in a windowless white room with a PS3. The camera slowly zooms into its eyes, which flash with color before starting to cry. The PS3 begins to hover and the ad abruptly ends. Who was it for? Why was it part of a $150 million campaign? I have no idea, but if the point was to get people talking, they succeeded. And it was far from the PS3's only weird advertisement. Have a look at these print ads, which are equally surreal and nonsensical. A bleeding chess piece, an eye in an orange peel. Others were a lot more straightforward, and I think the coolest one by far was the Universe of Entertainment ad. I'll remind you that this was done 20 years ago with no AI. If it wasn't for the Halo 3 Believe campaign, I'd honestly call this the GOAT of gaming commercials. Anyway, after a year of advertising,
I don't remember seeing those commercials. I'm gonna just put that out there. I don't remember seeing any of those commercials. But hey, if you guys have seen them, let me know in the comments below. But I don't remember seeing any of those commercials at all. They did look sick, but they 100% didn't make any sense at all.
Rumors and hype, the public finally got their hands on the PlayStation 3. Did it deliver? Well, let's find out. Just like the 360, the PS3 had its own iconic interface. It stayed more or less the same over the years, and that's because they kinda nailed it the first time. In the background are these dynamic, semi-transparent waves of light that drift across a gentle gradient. The menu icons are simple yet intuitive, with glossy, rounded edges and a frosted overlay. It's less colorful than the 360's, but it's also cleaner, more streamlined. Navigating it today feels no less futuristic or smooth than a PlayStation 5. Whether I can say the same for the gameplay though is another question entirely. Point is, the PlayStation had its own aesthetic and visual identity. From the glossy black hardware to the advertising and the look of the games themselves, it was nothing like its competition. These differences weren't just skin deep either, and as I played through its library, I gradually realized that the PlayStation did something that no one else did. But first, there's something we need to talk about. While I was writing this video, Sony made an announcement. From 2028 onwards, PlayStations will no longer use physical game discs, meaning new releases will exclusively exist as digital.
But then again, what's the point of putting a disc reader in the console if you're never gonna do this again? Like, why would you get what I'm saying? Why would you do this? Why would you do this, Sony? And this is why Microsoft is going to come back and they're going to take the industry over, the console industry. That Steam machine can't compete. It's powerful, yes, but at that point, at that price point, you might as well buy a handheld that you can dock and plug in a mouse and keyboard to. There's no point anymore if we're not going to have any discs to even entertain a console. There's no point.
licenses. To make things even more confusing, both the PS3 and PS Vita's online stores are being shut down. It's ironic because they're asking us to trust an all-digital future while simultaneously showing exactly why you shouldn't. The worst part is, it isn't even surprising. I mean, they've been putting less and less effort into physical media for years. Remember when boxes came with instruction manuals, guides, artwork, character bios? This was standard stuff for like a decade, regardless of whether you bought the deluxe or special edition. Going through all of these old games again, I found so much cool stuff.
Hold on, Prototype series, not talked about enough. Saints Row the Third, the best Saints Row game ever to be re-released. If we look here at the top middle of the screen, the Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, best Assassin's Creed game ever made. Darksiders 2, it's not talked about enough. LA Noire, not talked about enough. Last of Us started on here. Oh my goodness. Sleeping Dogs, Borderlands 2. This was just an elite era, guys. Dead Island. Remember when Dead Island first came out? Everyone was so hyped about it just because it was like a new kind of zombie experience that you could get other than from playing Call of Duty Black Ops 2. Like, this is
tucked away into the left side of their cases. Red Dead Redemption 1 has this amazing full-color map. GTA 4 has a comprehensive guide to local eats and sightseeing. You know what GTA 6 is gonna have? Nothing. Like,
hold on, sorry for pausing, but like the guides, bro, the guides back in the day would help you so much. Like, I would literally go into a GameStop, open up the disc. Obviously, there's no disc in the case, and I would just read the guide or look at the guide. The guides were that's what made buying games fun, is being able to look at the guides. Like, oh, what are they going to tell me? Are there any cheat codes? Are there any cheat codes in this guide? You know, like what is this guy going to tell me? Is he going to tell me how to play the game? Is he going to tell me how to use a move I don't know how to use? Like, I would read every single game.
Literally nothing. It doesn't seem like much, but it made these games feel like complete packages. Not only did you have access to all of the gameplay and content from the get-go, you also got a little something extra on the side. Naturally, all of this additional printing was the first thing to go when digital sales took off. Today, you'll find nothing more than a safety leaflet and some legal information. Hell, I bought Red Dead Redemption for my Switch, and the only paper in there was a game code. This could have been an email or an Instagram DM. Going back to PlayStation's announcement, I think a lot of people are missing something particularly concerning. See, when you bought a game like this in the 2000s, you bought the entire experience. There was usually no roadmap, no core features locked behind a paywall. The pressure was on studios to ship a complete product on a disc at launch. If everything's digital though, there's more room to drip feed updates and content, and treat games like ever-evolving live services rather than finished titles. I didn't need an internet connection or even an account to play most of these, and yet I could still boot them up and enjoy the full spectrum of content.
See, and that's like what we're losing nowadays. We're not going to be able to just throw a disc in and have it play. Granted, I don't understand how you can get a 13 gigabyte game on a disc. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, I understand how music is, how, you know, you put little indents in it, kind of like a record, and you put it in and it plays music, but I don't understand how we're able to get coded games on a disc. It's just like something I will not ever be able to comprehend. And then there's like a little scratch on it to where your game is corrupt in a certain spot of the game. Like, I don't, it just, it blows my mind how they're able to get so much on a disc.
I don't want to draw any conclusions too soon, but this alone made my experiences with the PS3 and 360 a lot smoother than their modern counterparts. Anyway, actually owning the games I bought was only half of it, because once I started playing them, I noticed something far stranger. Red Dead Redemption was the first title that really grabbed my attention. Considering the age of the PS3's hardware, I wasn't expecting all that much, and the blurry, pixelated visuals were hardly surprising. What was surprising though was the fact that there's some things this game does that this one doesn't get close to. The more I played, the more I noticed details and mechanics that had no business being in a 16-year-old game. For starters, the physics in Red Dead Redemption are simply better. And by better, I mean way more fun. Just compare the way the characters jump. John puts in 110% regardless of how pointless it is, while Arthur looks like those TikToks of people who never learned how. He can't even jump vertically. The next discovery I made was at Armadillo's Saloon. When John Marston gets drunk, they don't just slap on a filter and call it a day. Instead, this hilarious ragdoll movement kicks in, and you have to actively fight gravity to keep him upright.
Charges to shoot a horse. You will not perish.
This level of detail also extends to your enemies, who have their own range of unique and impressive animations. If you shoot someone's kneecaps, they'll respond as if you've shot their kneecaps. If you shoot someone on a ladder, they'll actually hang onto it and flail around, rather than just falling off like in Red Dead Redemption 2. In many cases, this made the basic gameplay loop of Red Dead 1 a lot more enjoyable than its sequel-prequel. I found even the most basic movements were so dynamic and entertaining. While the second is better in almost every other way, the fact you can compare them at all is crazy. And the same goes for GTA 4. It has this complex fighting system that's nowhere to be seen in 5. And all of the NPC's movements are expressive and over the top. If you, say, crash into someone, they'll go flying out of their windscreen. People react realistically to where they've been shot. It all seems pretty trivial, but it changes the feel of everything. Each encounter feels cooler, a little more chaotic and unpredictable. To me, this period of games struck the perfect balance between realism and fun, exaggerated gameplay. Now, sure, these are both games made by Rockstar, and they do use the same rage engine for their physics. But they aren't the exception, and I found the entire PS3 generation had this obsession with tiny details. The enemy animations in Uncharted, the destruction in Killzone 2, The Last of Us, the entire game. Seriously, I was playing this back and noticing something new every time. The way Joel shields himself from running water, how Ellie flinches when you shoot, the concept of opening doors in like 4 different ways. The fact this game could run at all was a technical miracle. The fact it did it so well is nothing short of insane. But that was kind of the point of this console, where the Xbox emphasized multiplayer and couch co-op. The PS3 became known for cinematic single-player experiences that squeezed every ounce of its power to create immersive and reactive worlds.
And all you hear is a jet engine at 12 o'clock at night. PS3 was probably about to blow up with how they were pushing that thing.
You can literally feel the ambition and hunger that went into making these games work on this console. In fact, if you listen closely, you may even hear it.
Look what I said.
But was it enough to beat out the 360? I think the answer to that is yes and no. Despite Sony's massive lead with the PS2, both of these consoles sold around 80 million units, and the PS3 only barely finished ahead. Culturally, I'd say the 360 was the bigger hit, while the PlayStation excelled with its cinematic exclusives. Uncharted, The Last of Us, Metal Gear Solid 4, God of War 3, they set a new standard for storytelling and immersion, a standard that, in my opinion, still holds strong. Now, there's one company I haven't mentioned yet, and that's for good reason. While these two were duking it out in the mid to late 2000s, the competition suddenly changed. They were no longer vying for first place, because that spot had already been taken. And this time, it wasn't even close. It's November 19th, 2006. The PS3 released just 2 days ago, but all anyone can talk about is the Wii. It's nothing like either of the consoles we've covered so far, and yet in its first year, it outsells both of them. Using an all-new motion-controlled remote, it completely changed how games were played, and who was playing them. This was the moment that gaming stopped being just for gamers. You'd find this thing in retirement homes, living rooms, house parties.
Everyone had a Wii. When I say everyone had a Wii, if you didn't have a Wii, it was like, bro, what are y'all doing? Get a Wii, man. Let's play some boxing. Let's bowl. Let's do baseball. Let's golf. Wii was where it was at when it came out. Wii was elite. It was elite.
For the first few years, it was nearly impossible to get one for retail. And that's why I have one here today, to see if it was really worth the hype 20 years later. The Nintendo of the 2000s was nothing like the Nintendo of today, and you feel it the second you turn on the Wii. Unlike the Switch 1 and 2, the interface is a lot more than a handful of squares. It's colourful and playful, arranged to look like a selection of TV channels. Icons and selection screens have cool blue tones and glossy gradients. This, of course, wasn't an accident. With the Wii's clean and approachable aesthetic, Nintendo set itself apart from Xbox and PlayStation, and Nintendo weren't the only ones doing this. At the time, you saw this philosophy across a lot of non-gaming products. Operating systems like Windows Vista and Mac OS X Leopard had a very similar style and goal, aiming to make technology appear friendlier by using vibrant colors and tactile designs. I actually think this trend has a name now, something to do with fruit, but that's beside the point. Whatever it's called, this style can be found everywhere on the Wii. Outside of its menus, it's in the games themselves, placing an even greater focus on lighthearted, low-stakes mistakes gameplay. Look at Wii Sports Resort, with all of its rounded edges and blue accents. Revisiting the Wii as someone with a Switch 2 made me realize how much of this stuff I missed. This console has character, while the Switch feels like little more than a vessel for games. Some of you might like that, and that's cool, but what's wrong with including stuff just for the sake of it being fun? Things like Mii's didn't revolutionize the gameplay, but they offered you a great way to personalize your console and really make it your own. You could spend hours meticulously detailing your family members before having a crack at Steve.
Not me. I would just make my character and start playing. I would piss my sister off by like making her be look completely like just ugly. She would get so pissed.
Harvey and Peter Griffin. They didn't need to include this stuff, but the fact they did gave the Wii so much personality. It made it feel like a hub, a place you could hang out and mess around in between games. When you look at most modern consoles though, you won't find these sorts of features at all. The Switch, for example, does its best to hide the existence of Mii's, and has largely replaced them with whatever these are. But let's move away from the console and start looking at the controller. To truly appreciate this thing, you need to understand that making it was incredibly risky. Motion controls just didn't really exist in the early 2000s, and they had no way of knowing whether they'd succeed or end up with another Virtual Boy situation. Nevertheless, Nintendo went ahead with it, and suffice to say, it paid off. Every console came with a copy of Wii Sports, ensuring anyone of any age and ability could immediately understand how the controller worked. That's why games like Wii Bowling and Tennis became so iconic. The barrier to entry was basically non-existent. And I gotta say, the motion controls still feel pretty responsive. Using them now is just as straightforward as it was 20 years ago. There's a surprising amount of nuance to the movement, and even slightly tweaking your wrist can make all the difference.
Nuance, guys. Hey, there's a lot of nuance to playing Wii Tennis. You just waggle your hand, buddy. There's not that much nuance going on. I would literally play like this. That's the nuance I had.
That being said, a clever controller doesn't fully explain the Wii's dominance. It managed to beat both the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 despite being significantly less powerful. So in a world where everyone wanted games to look like this, how did Nintendo come out on top? It's no secret that graphics have never been their priority, and nowhere was this more true than on the Wii. It had 12 times less processing power than the PS3, and its output was capped at 480p. In practice, this made it only slightly more powerful than the GameCube, which released a full generation earlier. And yet, no one seemed to care. The fuzzy, often low-poly visuals had little to no impact on sales, and the Wii saw the release of some of the greatest games ever made. Why? Because Nintendo knew something that Microsoft and Sony didn't. They made the Wii underpowered on purpose because they weren't even trying to compete with them. This is known as the Blue Ocean strategy. By opting out of the graphics arms race and focusing on fun, family-oriented gameplay, Nintendo steered themselves into a completely uncontested market space. There were plenty of fish in the sea, and these ones didn't care about fancy things like RAM and HD graphics. Consequently, Nintendo could appeal to more people with technically less, and this really paid off financially. Compared to these two, it was A, not being sold at a total loss, and B, significantly cheaper. Where a PlayStation cost Sony $800 to make and consumers $500 to buy, the Wii was selling for just $250 and still netting Nintendo around $50 a piece. Its tastefully underpowered hardware also avoided an issue that nearly destroyed the 360. Because it didn't overheat as much, it wasn't likely to, I don't know, spontaneously destroy itself on a random Friday in 2012, taking with it all of my Peggle and Minecraft progress. Reliability aside, the Wii succeeded because it innovated in a way that no one else did. And best believe its competitors noticed. Over at Xbox, they spent billions trying to recreate the magic with the Kinect. PlayStation made their own Move controller with a weird glowing bulb on it. To cut a long and painful story short, neither Microsoft nor Sony managed to replicate what Nintendo achieved with the Wii. To this day, it's still the most experimental success story in gaming history. The industry has changed a lot since these three were on shelves. The once fierce competition between Sony and Xbox fizzled out a long time ago, and frankly, it seems like the only loser was the consumer. The jumps between generations feel smaller than ever, as neither is motivated to push boundaries in the way they once did. Instead of new, experimental ways of playing, we're looking to actively lose features with the next wave of consoles. At this rate, you can wave goodbye to disk drives, local multiplayer, physical ownership. Sure, they'll be able to ray trace the hair on someone's balls, and they'll be infinitely more powerful than these old things. But I don't know. Going back and playing these made me realize something. I don't think the 2000s was the peak of gaming because one console or another won. I think it was because all three companies hit their creative peak at the exact same time. The Xbox 360 made what was quite possibly the best multiplayer ecosystem to date. Sony's PS3 pushed immersion and detail further than anyone. And as for the Wii, well, it single-handedly reinvented how games were played. I'd argue this was the only generation where you couldn't go wrong no matter which console you chose. Each of them offered something new with their...
I will say he didn't bring it up, but PS3 did offer free online gameplay without having to pay for it like Xbox Live. That was the one thing about PS3 where I was like, man, that's kind of cool. I wish I didn't have to buy the year pass, like, because I would go into Walmart, get the 1 year pass for Xbox, and then go about my day for the next year. And then you had to go back, get it again, $60, you know, that kind of thing. But the PS3, you didn't have to do any of that. It's kind of cool.
Their own identity and aesthetic. Gaming felt cooler because the systems themselves did. In my eyes, they haven't taken a leap this big ever since. But hang on, what about that thing I said in the intro? That thing about finding the single best year for gaming? Well, I kinda have two options. I could tell you that after going back and revisiting all of these games, there's simply no such thing. That it's subjective and only an idiot or a YouTuber would imply otherwise. Or I could tell you the truth, that there was 1 year that stood out to me. 1 year with an unrivaled roster of games, and 3 legendary consoles to play them on.
2007? I agree.
Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think below and subscribe if you want to see part 2, because we're going back even further.
Goated video by Extra Mint, guys. Make sure you subscribe and give it a like. Till next time, peace.